Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest Matthew Vezina, advocate for consumer rights.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Ann. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I am with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. We'd like to welcome you to our Lift Your Story podcast. Our guest today is Matthew Vezina, who is a consumer advocate.
Good evening, everybody.
We're glad to have you with us today, and I understand that you have a passion in your consumer advocacy. Would you tell us what that is?
Okay, my passion today for you is medical marijuana. The drug needs to be normalized in every sense of the term, which means I want to walk you through the process of what is medical marijuana, how people can access it, how people can then use it in the workplace responsibly, and how people hopefully can have it paid for by their benefit package.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, first of all, in the workplace, legal issues, injuries,
Absolutely. I don't know. Spot on. Tremendous responsibilities, legal issues, liabilities. The situation with that, I equate to the situation with any drug that is legally prescribed to people that they use while at work that have obvious side effects. So we can talk about antidepressants or other types of drugs, but the bottom line is most pharmaceuticals have some side effects. 45% of the Canadian population is on pharmaceuticals every day of the week of the month of the year. So 45% of the people in your workplace are on some type of pharmaceutical drug. So those drugs have side effects. So my position is that medical marijuana can have similar, different side effects to those existing drugs, and those side effects have to be dealt with the same way that other drugs are dealt with in the workplace. In other words, a user using a drug responsibly in the workplace, regardless of what that drug is, and knowing the side effects and limiting the amount of drug to limit the amount of side effects will allow them to do their job responsibly in the workplace and still have their medication just like 40% of the population do today.
Yeah.
So you were speaking prior to us getting on in regards to, and I don't know if I'm veering off too far, so you can bring me back in if I am, regarding the opioids and versus.
Yeah, okay. And this is why I'm so passionate about this issue in the first place. I have a degenerative disc disease. It's been obviously clinically diagnosed. It's been supported by medical x-rays and all of the diagnostic tools that they use for that type of diagnosis. The bottom line is that problem developed because of my work. I've been in the same job for 39 years, and my job involves sitting at a desk all day. And believe it or not, my job also involves sitting at home for 2-3 hours a night, 2 or 3 nights a week, my entire career doing extra work for my job. And I'm not going to talk about my job. It's not important. Not everybody has a job and they have their own issues with their job. The bottom line is I developed a degenerative disc disease from all that sitting, and it causes long-term ongoing pain. My solution to that pain is a pain relief medication. So I consulted my doctor, and my doctor gave me a number of options. And those options included mostly opiate-based pharmaceutical interventions. I didn't agree with taking that type of option. I should say that since I was 17 years old, I've never taken aspirin, Anacin, Tylenol, and I've never taken any pharmaceutical prescriptive drug in my life, except for the odd course of antibiotics for obvious reasons at the time. So I'm not very predisposed to the pharmaceutical industry to begin with, and certainly not the pharmaceutical industry around pain-killing relief, which is opiate-based, and it's highly addictive, and it's highly destructive, and I didn't want anything to do with it. And I told my doctor that. So the only other option I had at that point was medical cannabis. So I decided to investigate medical cannabis. once I started to investigate, I realized that medical cannabis actually could, if prescribed properly, allowed properly in the workplace, and paid for properly through benefits, could probably eliminate a large number of the existing opiate-based pain prescriptions that people are on today. And so that became a really eye-opening moment to me, and that drove my passion, which is why I'm here today, because I honestly believe that if medical marijuana was normalized like every other drug in every other sense of the term, then we could probably eliminate a large portion of the opiate crisis. And I'm very serious about that.
So what's your experience, personal experience?
My personal experience with what? Opiates or marijuana?
No,
Or
with treatment of medical marijuana.
Okay, it works in my case. I can't speak for any other person, any other situation. I can point people to studies, the internet's full of them. There's all kinds of anecdotal evidence, but the bottom line is the Medical Association in Canada has recognized that cannabis used for pain relief is a proper pharmaceutical application, and they have now licensed it for that use. So I can say it's legal and it works for me. And I have never taken any other type of painkiller to deal with my long-term disc problem. And my mobility and my pain relief are, I would say my pain relief is probably an 8 out of 10 on the scale. And my mobility is certainly an 8 or 9 out of 10 for a 60-year-old male.
Wow, that's pretty impressive.
I'm lucky. I have good genetics.
Yeah, if you've never taken a painkiller and you're 60 years old, I'm going to say so. Yeah, for sure.
Well, I do believe in medical cannabis, and I do believe it works, and it does have other effects. It's not a drug that, like any other drug, it has side effects, and some of them are good. I will tell you that one of the side effects I have found over the years of using this product is it helps you sleep. You sleep much better.
Oh,
And we're now finding out how important sleep is for your overall health. And in fact, sleep is becoming the single most important component, they're starting to find out, to eliminate plaque and tau buildup in your brain, which is leading indicators of Alzheimer and dementia. So sleep well, live longer.
it's interesting you mentioned sleep, because my mother is she's got some things she's trying to find a neurologist, because she's got some issues with nerves and stuff. And every neurologist she calls, they say, we only treat sleep.
Yeah. Well, I would suggest your mother should start reading some articles about CBD-based medications, which are legal in most of the states, I understand. And I'm not an expert on the legalities, obviously. But CBD-based medications do not have THC. They have no psychotropic effect. And they come in form of gummies and chocolate bars and other things that are easily to eat, to enjoy, and to get the desirable effect of sleeping better. Yeah. So we might want to mention that to her. Maybe or just buy her something for a treat.
Yeah, okay, that's a great idea. But, you know, I don't know in Canada versus the US, you know, big pharma here, they've got everything locked down. I mean, they if there's something great comes out, they buy it out. They get the government to regulate against it. I mean, it's a battle here in the States for any homeopathic natural treatment for anything. It gets shut down as soon as it comes out.
I understand the problems. I am media aware. Let me put it that way. And not just my little town in Toronto here. I understand the problems that each state is facing because there's an overall federal law that bans cannabis, period, end of story. So each state is on their own, and then you can't bank the money and you can't build a business. And yes, there's all kinds of problems, but America's moving forward. And you can see it every day in the news. States every day are starting to move forward on legislation. I think most states do recognize medical cannabis, and they're starting to move forward on recreational cannabis. So I think that roadblock is gone. But that being said, Big Pharma owns the medical cannabis industry, and not Big Pharma, but big business will own the recreational marijuana industry. There is no question in my mind that they already own it. Okay, it's big business, and they're not going to let that money go away anymore. That money is too big and too easy to earn, and the scales of economies on producing marijuana are just ridiculous. You're talking about a weed that you're selling for, $200, $300 a pound for a weed.
So my next question would be, so we were talking about, and it's great, like insurance companies don't cover for that, but they cover for other medications. And that I think is one of the things that you were speaking to as well.
Okay, let's circle around a little bit. Okay, first of all, I think we have clearly established that medical cannabis is legal in Canada and in other countries in the world, and in some states, and more going forward. Okay, so let's start with that base. Now, what do you do if you want medical cannabis in Canada? In Ontario specifically, where I have my experience, you go to your family doctor or your physician that will refer you to a cannabis specialist doctor. And that doctor will then do an intake with you to find out whether you do have, number one, a medical issue that could be treated by medical cannabis, and number two, a product that could possibly treat you. So they're looking at two things. Do you have a problem, and can they fix it? And if it's not yes to those two questions, they won't refer you or license you for medical cannabis, and you're down to the recreational market. If they do license you, then the benefit of that is, first off, you can use cannabis anywhere. So you're not restricted like recreational marijuana users are to medical cannabis, which means a lot of places where you normally can't use the product, you can use your medicine, okay, first and foremost. Secondly, there are issues regarding legalities with obviously impaired care and control of vehicles, okay? The legals are out on this, and this is blue sky stuff, but I would suggest that down in the future, there may be some protection as testing gets better of the levels of THC in your blood when you're driving the vehicle. There may be some protection afforded by having a license or a prescription for medical cannabis. Thirdly, and this is the one that we're here about, using your medicine at work. So once you go and get a referral from your family doctor and you go see the specialist, and the specialist says, yes, we think you can benefit from this medicine, they will prescribe you a licensed dispenser. A licensed dispenser is a dispenser who is licensed by the government of Canada through Health Canada to dispense medical marijuana. And they have all different types of medical cannabis, and they have all different strains and grades, and they rate their CBD and their THC levels by strain and grade. And we can go into the details, but just let me finish this thought here. So anyway, you're licensed, you have a supplier, you now buy your product and you pay for it. And guess what? You go to your insurance company at work and you go, okay, I have a medicine, it's prescribed by a doctor, I paid for it, I would like it paid for, and they say, sorry, we won't pay for that. So they say, you can claim it on your income tax. So the average medical cannabis user in Canada, according to the numbers that are out there and what insurance companies are setting base claims at right now, is about $5,000 a year. So I don't know how many people have $5,000 a year that they can spend on their medicine, period. And I don't think it's fair, and I think it needs to change. So we need to find out how we can get our insurance companies and our benefits to pay for our medical marijuana, or our medical cannabis, sorry. And that's a big problem. Now, sorry, let me stop for a second. Do you have questions about what I just rattled on about?
No.
Okay. Just a quick heads up about the technology and the terminology here. CBD and THC, okay? CBD oil is part of the product of the marijuana plant or the cannabis plant. and it is the non-psychoactive portion of the flower. And it is used for things like creams and different types of medicines, like I said, gummies and chocolates and stuff like that. And it's used to relieve pain. And that's the purpose of it. And it works quite well for those types of pain. THC is psychoactive. It's much more powerful than CBD-based cannabis products. And it has a much more powerful effect on deep pain, not the surface pain like bruises or maybe a skin rash or something like that, but the real deep pain, the type of pain, for example, that I feel in my spine. Okay, so it relieves that pain. And so that's why I use that product. So there is a difference. There's also a difference in how it affects you and the side effects. CBD products have virtually no side effects. So anybody who's a medical cannabis user and is not using the flower product, but is using other derivatives that are CBD derivative products, will have no side effects whatsoever using the product. So there is no issue about using that in work or anything else. So those products should be paid for immediately. I don't understand why they're not covered. Where the employer has issues is obviously with THC-based medical cannabis users, because they're the ones who get, quote, high. And that's a problem. And I understand that, that's realistic. But there are a lot of jobs that you can do where you have a slight side effect from your medication and it won't affect your performance. So that's the first tier. And there's a number of tiers, obviously. Anybody operating any equipment obviously would be in some tier that would have to have some period of time delayed between when they did their medicine and when they actively went back to that job. So I can tell you in my experience, I got my medical cannabis license from my doctor, and then I notified my workplace and I said, by the way, I have some medicine here and I'm going to be using it at work. And I told them that because at the time, recreational marijuana was not legal in Canada. So having marijuana at work would have been illegal outside of my medical designation. Mm-hmm. So I informed my employer because I wanted to use my product at work and I had nothing to hide. I was on the ups. My employer immediately said I couldn't use my product at work. So this is what you're going to face, folks. If you want to be honest, and you always should be. I said to my employer, it's legal. What's the problem? They said, we don't have a policy for it. We're not allowing it. And I can tell you, I work for a very large organization. They have tens of thousands of employees. I'm shocked they don't have a policy. Medical cannabis has been forced to be legal by the Supreme Court of Canada since 2001. So that's a long time to wait for a policy, 20 years, 21 years. Back then it was only 17. Anyway, they didn't have a policy, so they refused to let me use it. So I immediately used what was available to me, which was a union grievance process. And I filed a grievance process. And through the process, initially I wasn't allowed to use my medicine at work. I was hit with all kinds of questionnaires and stuff from my doctor and my specialist. And anyway, all this took time, cost money, obviously. And by the time I think the fourth form was sent out, we're up to about, this form was going to cost $400 or $500 to get filled out. And my doctor said he wasn't going to fill it out until he was paid up front. And I informed them that that was what's happened. And they said, no, they're not going to pay anything up front. They'll pay when they get it. And I said, well, you know, you're demanding the form, you're running the grievance process, you're stopping me from using my medication. Don't you need to move forward with the process? And what happened inevitably is they just basically sat on it and waited and, you know, dug in their heels and thought that that would be the end of it. And at the same time, they had hit me with a number of demands of if I wanted to use, part of the process was they gave me a demand sheet with about 20 demands that I'd have to follow if I wanted to use my medicine at work. And they included things like going off of my workplace. So down a dark alley on a sidewalk, I think, I don't know, to use my medicine, to not return back to work for 2 hours unpaid without pay after I'd taken my medicine at any time, to inform my manager that I was about to use my medicine. Anyway, the number of restrictions were just absurd. And I understood what they were trying to do was use me as a test employee to create what I would call a regime for employees that have medical cannabis. So in other words, if I agreed to restriction A, B, and C, they could then say to any other employee that brought this issue forward, well, sure, just follow A, B, and C like Joe Blow agreed to. And I don't agree with that. And I dug in my heels and I said, look, it's very simple. Treat it like any other medication. Here's my position. And I went back to them and said, this is my position. You send a questionnaire out to every employee that works for the same company I work for, asking 3 questions. The first question being, do you take any type of prescriptive medication at work, yes or no? Second question being, if you do take a prescriptive medication at work, are there any known side effects, yes or no? Third question, if there are side effects, what are those side effects? Okay. And I said, now, if you send that questionnaire out to every employee you have and send it out to me, I'll answer it. And any restrictions you put on any employee based upon the answers to that questionnaire, I'll agree to those restrictions. Any restriction put on medical cannabis users, not put on every other employee, I won't agree to, and we'll continue the process. They rejected, obviously, my position. I thought it was reasonable, 3 simple questions.
Yeah,
I agree.
I agree.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
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 So anyway, they rejected my suggestion and again, let it sit. So at this point, I was faced with nothing other than to take my own personal job action, which was every day that I woke up and my back hurt, I called in sick because I couldn't use my medication to relieve my pain. So I couldn't go to work. So I started to miss quite a few days of work. That became a problem for them because they had to pay me. And I have a good sickness policy that will pay me up to half a year's pay off on short term. And this is all considered short term. So I understood what my rights were. I understood what was in play here. And I just refused to let them put restrictions and use me as an example. Inevitably, what happened was I got a quiet email that said, basically, you can use your medicine at work as long as it doesn't affect your job or your coworkers, which is exactly what any other person has to do with any other medication. And that was the end of it. And I've never had a complaint since, never heard about it since. Now, it's interesting, they've never talked about this. They never told anybody about it. They've never published anything about the arbitration or anything else. So it seems to me that the employer would still like to make sure the fewer the medical cannabis users in the workplace, the better, even if those people have to take opiates. And I'll tell you, my insurance company will pay for all the opiates in the world I want tomorrow based upon my x-rays. You know, they'll pay for them left, right, and center, and they'll probably cost more than my cannabis. So it's really a shameful situation.
So basically, it's kind of like what we'd call a brother-in-law deal. Just between you and me, this is what we got.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I started this fight about 4 years ago for coverage, for medical coverage, because that's the real fight, right? That's the real fight. Pay for my medicine, please. Diabetics have that issue, I think, in the States. It's really serious. Yeah. So anyway, the idea of coverage is it's any medication. It's just like anything else. You're not going to abuse it, and it should be covered. There are now insurance companies in Canada that actually cover medical cannabis. It started because, believe it or not, and this is so funny, the first group of people to sue their insurance company for medical coverage in Canada was a group of war vets, if you can believe it. Mm-hmm. And of course, they don't want opiates, and they were quite happy to have their medical cannabis, but they couldn't afford it. So they sued the government to pay for it, and they won. The court agreed with them. It should be paid for. So they were the first successful lawsuit in Canada against not paying for legal medication. The second group was a group of students, I believe, in the University of Guelph or Waterloo or something. And it was a student union group, and apparently they were successful as well. The insurance companies started to modify their position after they saw the writing on the wall. The really big policies are still being excluded simply because of numbers. So you may be able to get a special exception through some insurance companies, and some may be more forthcoming that the coverage is available. But in my instance, where my union is very big, I've numerous times tried to access coverage, and they've told me numerous times they don't cover it, and it's not their responsibility. And they put it back on the employer and say the employer has to ask for the coverage before the union will grant it in the CBA and la, la, la. And it's really a ping pong game. And it's interesting because 3 years ago, the ping pong game was there's no BI or DIN number for medical cannabis. A DIN number is Health Canada's drug identification number. So initially the insurance companies were saying, well, we can't pay for this claim because there's this line on our forms that says DIN number. And if we leave it blank, well, the form can't be processed, the computer will spit it out. And so we're not paying until there's a DIN number. So that went on, that silliness for a while. And companies were eventually sued. So they got around the fact there's no DIN number. Today, there's still no DIN number for medical cannabis, even though numbers of insurance companies are now paying for it.
Wow.
So yeah, it's like a ping pong game, and where it's going to cost them a lot of money, it seems like they're hitting the ball back, right? And the bigger companies are basically making people jump through hoops to get coverage in Canada for medical cannabis. But I will tell you, okay, I printed this out. This is up to date, apparently. And it surprised me because my employer's on here as well, and they continue to deny they provide coverage. But just to give you an idea of what we're talking about, the kind of hoops people have to go through. Sun Life Financial in Canada will qualify for severe pain with cancer or nausea and vomiting with cancer treatments, spasticity or neuropathic pain with multiple sclerosis, rheumatoid arthritis when all other standard treatments have failed, anorexia or neuropathic pain with HIV/AIDS and palliative care. And they will cover it between $1,500 and $6,000 a year. That's a very limited scope of coverage. I would say most of those people I don't think are working if they have those physiologies. So, I mean, it just gives you an idea. I could go through the list. Manulife in Canada covers it, but you have to contact your plan administrator, which means good luck. That's good luck, right? That's what
put you in the never-ending loop, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and that goes on and on. You see that quite a bit. We do have here Great West Life, which is a large insurance company here in Canada. And again, it's sort of the same severe problems. There's nothing here for just pain relief, which is the #1 reason why it's prescribed in Canada. So there's a problem here. This drug has not been normalized. In the year 2001, the Supreme Court of Canada, or it might have been 2000, rejected any argument against medical marijuana and said that Canada had to license cannabis for medical use. So nothing happened for 15 years or 12 years or 15 years. So here we are, we finally got to a point where, okay, it's available, but guess what they did? Immediately on the heels of that, what they do? They legalized recreational marijuana, right? So where's the money?
Yeah.
And that's the answer.
Yeah.
That's the answer right there. So until this drug is treated like every other drug, they aren't being intellectually honest with us, and they're driving for profit. It's interesting because medical cannabis is more expensive than recreational cannabis by a factor of 1.5 usually. So that's something else to think of.
Well, Matthew, how can our listeners reach out to you that are concerned with this?
Well, I'll tell you what, I have a interesting Gmail address, and I'll give it to you.
Okay.
It's domed, DOMED, human, HUMAN, @gmail.com.
That is interesting.
That is very interesting. I really, really appreciate you sharing all this with us.
Yeah.
It's been an interesting journey. I've learned a lot. There's a lot more to be done, but the first thing to do is tell people, guess what? You can have this as medicine. You can use it at work. You don't have to worry about it. And hopefully you'll be able to get it paid for in the future. If it's not paid for now, for those lucky few.
Thank you.
Okay. Great.
And just the numbers, really quick, the numbers. I think there's about 320,000 medical cannabis users in Canada today at an average of $5,000 a year. We're talking astronomical numbers here, and that's Canada. Could you imagine the States?
Yeah.
Think about it and follow the money, boys, because that's what's going to happen down there, right?
That even almost sounds low a little bit. Sorry, but it does. You said 300. How many?
Sorry.
300.
Yeah, I said about 320,000 Canadians at about $5,000 a year. That's licensed medical cannabis. 40%, what was the latest figure? Just so you know, because this is an interesting stat. I'll throw this at you just before we go. I think it was 40% of Canadians have, 18% of Canadians over the age of 25 have reported cannabis use in the last month. Almost 20% of Canadians just in the last month. So, and medical cannabis isn't licensed to people under the age of, I think, 24.
That's right.
Okay, so it's not licensed to 18-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's really important because there is a potential schizophrenic link that they've looked into that there's, it's not positive, but it's something to be concerned about.
I agree. All right. Thanks for clarifying that.
Well,
Thanks
thanks for
again.
being with us and sharing your story. We really appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Well, I hope I was able to inform a few people and more so to motivate people to use resources available to you that are healthier for you, will give you a better result in the long run, and just won't make you sicker. Just don't make yourself sicker.
Okay.
Thanks again, Matthew. Appreciate
No
it.
problem. I enjoyed it. Have a good day, folks.
Okay, you too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to this episode. Be sure to visit us at lifterstory.com.